Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is SP Jimmy, and you're watching the Paragon City podcast. Please join me in welcoming back our co-host, Normal Guy.
Howdy, neighbor.
Yay, Normal Guy's here. Uh, Normal Guy, we had a few more episodes of Under Atlas After Dark come out. Have you had a chance to watch them yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny going through all of the motions and language, obviously when we're hanging out, and then just getting to sit there and listen to it a second time. It's just like, oh my god, I really said that. Or like, just I guess hearing it from an outside perspective, it's a lot of fun too. I never thought it would actually be that kind of fun since previously I've never listened to podcasts before, so it's definitely pretty enjoyable.
Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying it, and I hope that you and everybody's having a good time making Under Atlas since it is pretty much open. I posted on the Reddit where I linked the first Paragon City podcast. I also mentioned how people could get into Under Atlas if they wanted to join. And we have somebody here who has been in Under Atlas, technically. I see your name in the episodes, and anybody who watches the screen would see Deverger, who we have with us today. But I believe that this is the first time that I've ever heard you on the mic or you come on. So thank you for coming on with us, Deverger. Welcome to the channel.
Hello, I'm Deverger. I work with COXG on the dev team, mostly working with powers.
Voice reveal. It's pretty funny because despite being on the same team and the same server as Deverger, this is actually the first time that even I've heard his voice. I don't think he's ever actually talked. He's more of a quiet listener. And it's actually pretty exciting getting to hear it. It's like, oh snap. The new side of Deverger we've never seen before.
Deverger took a break from his power set developing to come over and hang out with us, but I played with you as well, Deverger. You have Lumia, right? What is that character that you play?
Lumia is my nature holy light defender, and I'm using her as sort of a to get a feel for how both the sets play.
Tell you what, she's definitely a lifesaver in the group, that's for sure. I can't count the numerous times where we've almost had a group wipe, and then, Lumia swoops in and actually, manages to bring everybody from the top. Honestly, it's been pretty fun being able to group with you.
Deverger, you are in the unique position that not only do you get to play the archetypes and power sets that you're working on, but you're also developing them and balancing them. Which archetypes do you get to work with?
Defenders, corruptors, dominators, blasters, and mastermind secondaries.
Wow, that is quite a lot. Holy cow.
I'm noticing a theme though. A lot of those archetypes will share blasting powers or support powers. Why do you get all the support powers? How did you guys decide that?
That's just what we decided to do when we were divvying out who gets what to make sure we don't step on each other's toes with files and design ideas.
So it keeps it in-house that you would never have to step on somebody who was developing like the tanker roles, because if you were to make things that had similar power sets to that, it could go wrong and have these adverse effects. But you had to break up masterminds. Who's the other person who's doing the primary for masterminds?
Zeus handles all the primary mastermind stuff.
Oh yeah, the guy that we were hanging out with just the other day.
Yeah, we were hanging out in Atlas Park, messing around with GM commands.
It's honestly really nice that despite the fact everybody's working together and, having fun, y'all have your own individual niches that you work on, yet at the same time can still loan between each other. It's a nice degree of freedom, honestly, for a developer, I'd imagine. It's actually pretty nice considering the fact that while y'all have your own niches you're working on with the different power sets and the like, you can still get together and confer with one another about, oh yeah, maybe this should tweak like this, or how certain powers will associate with different archetypes. So it's almost like a level of freedom between the different developers.
Yeah, for the most part, we're allowed to do anything we want, but we chat on what we'd like to do and plans for things that we might not know how to do, like on an individual basis, that somebody else might be able to key us in.
And there's so many new power sets and ideas. There are things that we haven't even heard of, or what, like even this morning, Zeus put out something that he was working on and we had no idea what it was. I don't think anybody knew what was going to be coming out, but what was it? Pirate something?
Yeah, Pirate Mastery. Definitely. When I went to go tell my dad about it, he was absolutely thrilled. And I can't even begin to imagine what it might be.
Yeah, we did some minor discussion on some pirate stuff a few days ago, but nothing was expected to come out of it, so I was surprised as everybody else this morning.
So you're saying that it's a surprise that he just kind of pulled it out, just plucked out from the sky, so you don't have any idea what it is whatsoever? Do you think you might have an idea or some guesses what it could possibly be?
Going by the name, I'd assume it's a epic pool for masterminds, but it really could be anything because you can name them whatever you want.
Deverger, do you have any secret power sets that you're working on that you're keeping under wraps? Is there something going to come out of left field? What are some of the power sets that you've been working on recently?
Recently, I've been going over a support set tune-up, which covers masterminds, corruptors, defenders, controllers. So just going through and not any major reworks, just touching the numbers up to be up to par with my recent standards.
And it's honestly funny how that works out, considering you mentioned that there might be speculation on if it's a mastermind mastery epic pool, and then mentioning smoothing things out for masterminds on your end. And it just kind of goes back to how y'all confer with each other but work independently. And I love, you almost seem to have kind of like this groove where y'all know what you're doing, but it's like synchronization almost, you know? It's so awesome.
And it works out nicely because we can work at our own pace, and then when it comes together, we work together to make sure it gets onto the server as intended.
So when you do just base percentages, like let's say you wanted to reduce the endurance amount of a certain power, is that something as simple as putting in a couple of numbers, or what does that look like in terms of balancing?
It's pretty simple. For the most part, you look at the set and what capabilities it has. In some situations, like my recent support stuff has been blanket passes. Like every toggle that support sets have has had its endurance cost reduced by half because they were pretty excessive, like almost oppressive.
Were you able to feel a change in the characters that you were playing after you made that?
Oh yeah, I've been playing Holy Light and Nature on live to get a feel for how they play and what the problems of the set are and what can be improved. So a lot of the changes are actually focused on Nature in particular because it has some annoying little hiccups.
Nature is one of the most powerful primaries or secondaries that you can have depending on the class that you are. It takes a mastermind and turns them into just this overwhelming force of hit points coming back and the status effects that it causes. How are you liking that on a defender? I've never tried Nature on a defender.
Oh, Nature's great. It's probably my favorite support set now, and I've played quite a bit of them throughout just the years of playing City Heroes. It's almost like Empathy, but without the downsides of Empathy. And team-wide build-up is nice. I think it's Overgrowth, its final power.
Yeah, and Empathy only has Fortitude and Adrenaline boost, but those are both single targets that you would put on. I played a lot of Empathy because I thought that putting hit points back into the team was going to be one of the more productive ways to get through Task Force and all the content that I wanted to be able to do. But I wish I had done Nature because it's able to do that and a bunch of other things. But what is a power set that you've had to work with where maybe it was less powerful than Nature and you had to bring it back up?
Empathy is definitely one of the ones that needs a major rework, probably the most. But the problem is there's not anything technically wrong with it. It just kind of got power creeps by other sets. It still functions. Its intended function very well. It's just the intended function is kind of dated.
I wonder if there'd be a way to tweak it a little bit, almost where like maybe a certain amount of overhealing could contribute to like an overshield, kind of like how some of the newer powers have, to almost bring it up as like a slight fresh retake.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea, and it wouldn't be all that hard to do. I have to look into that.
There's a fine line between putting an overheal or putting an absorb or putting a shield and not stepping out of what Empathy was meant to be, even if the thought on Empathy and the way that it plays is a little bit dated. But I'm sure there's a way to make it work. If you can find a way to make it work, I'm gonna hop on and test that because I love Empathy, but it just doesn't have the kick that a lot of the other sets do have, and it has a place. I had a lot of macros and binds to set like Clear Mind to auto cast if I did Fortitude or what have you, but it just needs a little something else. It's because if you're the health set, you should be able to add extra health or do something like that.
Since I've been doing a support pass, what I did for Empathy was I slashed the recharge on the 2 aura abilities, Recovery Aura and Regeneration Aura, so they're up. Should be more often. I had to cut their durations just because I have like a formula in my head for duration versus recharge, because if you mess that up, you make it to where it's permanent very easily, and those are very strong buffs.
So you have defenders, controllers, all those nice support sets. What do you do for the dominators?
Well, Dominators are in a pretty good spot in general, but some of their secondaries were lacking. Like Electric Assault in general might actually have been the worst design set in the game, like both on a coding standpoint and as a like playing through it feels horrible. So what I did is I rearranged some of the powers, and it was lacking a T3 Blast. This is your Blaze equivalent, your Bitter Ice Blast equivalent, and without that, it felt like its damage was very anemic. So adding that in, converting the snipe into a T3 Blast was a good move that I thought would improve the play of the set, and according to the feedback, people love it.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned snipe because I had been seeing some rumblings and some feedback from players about how they're not really big fans of snipe just in general across the board. And I feel like I can definitely empathize a little bit about that. For a class like that, it feels like you kind of want to be, getting in the fray and rip and tear. But then when you pause for a moment and then just stop everything just to build up a snipe, like it doesn't really feel like it has very much flow to it.
Yeah, with Dominator's role as a control class and as a melee and range specialist, it didn't feel right to just be, standing there casting an attack. But you could be controlling the enemies or going in for melee for the big damage.
It sounds like a lot of fun, the electrical assault for Dominators that you changed around. I really wanted to try the Psychokinetic set, and that's like one of the next ones on my list. But hearing that you, Deverger, are actually going back and making adjustments to some of the power pools that we already have, I'm going to have to try them out now. I want to follow you around, and whatever archetype you just finished working on or whatever power set you just finished working on, I'm going to play that one until you finish the next. And that's probably going to be the order that I go in, or kind of rotate it around to get a feel. But we have a few testers in QA, and you, Deverger, are playing yourself, testing out the classes so that you can kind of get a feel for the leveling process and what tweaks you need to make and where. I think that we would love to have more people coming on and trying out these power sets, because all the changes that you've made, they're already on live, right?
All the changes to Dominators are live, including both their primaries and their secondaries, and controllers benefited from some of the changes to control sets. What else did I do? Oh, I removed all the restrictions from the pool powers. So before to get burnout, you would have to get what, 3 powers from the power pool, speed power pool set. You could just once you get to level 20, you just grab a burnout, first thing you wanted.
I saw that. You're the one that made that change, because I noticed when I looked at the power pools that there were a lot more options available than maybe what I should have had at the time. And I was like, you're telling me I can skip straight ahead to the one power that I'm actually in this set to get, and just not have to get the weird travel power to make sure I have 1 or 2 extras? That's amazing.
Yeah, I've been calling that pool power under restriction, and the reason why I did it is because a lot of players were complaining. Well, it's been a long complaint about how you have to take these powers that you don't want or you're never going to use in order to get access to the stuff you actually do want that might be critical to your build.
I mean, and when I think of pool powers, the first thing that comes to mind is a pool. And I think, I don't want to have to wade through the shallow end just to get my way over to the deep end so I can actually swim. Sometimes I just want to cannonball into the deep end. Sometimes I don't want to wear the little floaties just so that way I can go swim how I want. Sometimes I just want to be able to, do what I want. So that's, I think, also very in line with the server ideology, of just doing what you want.
Especially if you already know how to swim, for that metaphor, because I've made some power set videos in the past that go over, mids, and so mids reborn is what the future ones are going to have to be using. But I'm pretty familiar with enhancements and percentages and working together with powers and considering who you might also have on the team with you. And I know that it's not just your power set that you can look at. You have to consider the team balance and what a speed boost is going to do to an adjustment that you make on the recharge of regeneration or recovery aura and things like that, or what hasten is going to do, because you're always going to take hasten from the power pools, right? It's not inherent yet. That's always going to be taking up a slot.
Inherent hasten is something I really wanted to do, but it's kind of a mess of balance just by itself that we decided not to do it.
I remember back in the very early days when everyone would take the increased health and the increased endurance from the fitness pool. And I mean, I was definitely guilty of that back in the day. And it just was so widespread across the board that the developers just went, you know what, let's make it inherent. So it's really funny seeing us currently deal with the same situations for powers as the original developers did back in the day. And then it just shows that, the amount of effort and thought that has to go into it is just all encompassing.
Oh yeah, that's the same exact logic that got me thinking about Inherent Hasten. But the thing is, Hasten is a 70% recharge buff that you can have up, I think it's 3/4 of the time by default, maybe 2-3. But it's too strong an effect to be giving away for free, despite the fact that everybody ends up taking.
It is too strong of an effect. But how close is the source material Deverger that you get to work with to what the original developers had when the game was on live?
The data set we use is, I think it's the closest thing we have to clean issue 24 data. So it would have been on the beta test server. No, I think it was pushed to live at the very end when the game sunsetted. But we're also missing parts of that data, so there's certain things we can't do.
Certain things we can't do, but there's certain things that we can do. Like you guys were talking about hanging out with Zeus while you guys were trying out the new power sets. You were messing around turning people into giant monsters or something. I saw a picture of a Richty mothership hovering over the Atlas statue and my heart dropped. And I was like, what is going on in there? What were you guys messing around with?
Zeus was just having some fun with some of the GM commands, and he was turning the little patrolling civilian gray health NPCs into just various different models.
And there was a fifth column war machine just kind of going for an afternoon stroll. It's actually pretty wild seeing it off in the distance, when you'd imagine like an NPC model be faded out. Just seeing him, way off in the distance is kind of stepping on Hellions, just a regular day in Paragon City.
I'm pretty sure the bigger a model is, the further away it renders from.
That's good, because otherwise he would just like all of a sudden pop up when you're 30 yards from him or whatever your range of view is.
Yeah, you would notice that like if you're running around, you'd see a giant monster off in the distance easier than you would like the enemies right next to him.
So you've been making some changes to the epic pools as well. What have you gotten to work with for your archetypes?
Oh yeah, I changed the Dominator Psionic Mastery set as a sort of test bed, because one of the things I want to do is add a little bit more support into the Dominator epic set. And the Sonic one already had some support abilities in it, so I went and played with the numbers.
And I think that of the different archetypes being divided into different developers to work on the powers, you have probably the two most hardcore fan base classes, being the Blaster. I would say is probably number one, that if you make any changes to the Blaster or you say anything about the Blaster, like I have, people have very strong opinions about that class. And then also the Defender, I've noticed, especially like bubble defenders, if that is your main, probably hold it very dear to your heart, because I hear about those probably more than any other of the archetypes that I've ever done a video or a power set that I've ever talked about. So I do not envy your position to have to make the choices and things that could affect those classes that are very popular, it seems like.
Oh yeah, blasters in general are a hot topic, because they are in a situation where they do need improvement, but going ahead on what exactly to improve is a touchy subject, because their secondary pools have just such a variety of abilities that buffing them in certain ways might step on the other archetype's toes. Like you can't give the Blaster too much control because it's stepping on the Dominator. You can't give them too much support because it's stepping on Corruptors and Defenders.
And I suppose just taking a Blaster and just trying to do something like just make it tanky or something is a whole different archetype probably wouldn't work out too well. So it's definitely tricky.
So the Blasters have a ranged primary, and then they have their manipulations as their secondaries. And every one of the manipulations has at least some form of a melee attack. And it's kind of that balance between Blasters that they're supposed to be like the ranged glass cannons. Have you had any challenges with the melee powers that they have? They're supposed to be blappers, right? If you build them with energy secondary, that used to be really popular.
Well, yeah, Blaster secondaries have always been a big part of their identity, which is how the whole Blapper thing came about. And it's definitely a high risk, high reward thing, because you do more damage with your melee attacks, but you're also way more exposed. And I don't really want to get rid of that, because I feel like it's a big core thing for the class identity.
Good luck with ice manipulation and electrical manipulation, by the way. I don't know what you're gonna be able to do with those.
I've got plenty of ideas, but when I get around to it, but Blasters are kind of on the lower end of my priority list, just because they're going to need some pretty big changes.
Let's hear some specifics about the Holy Light set that you'd been working on, because I don't think too many people might know specifically what it's bringing to the table. Like,
Yeah, Holy Light looks really interesting. You can hit an enemy and then it causes like an area of effect heal to come off of them. Only that we would see in like Twilight Grass from Dark heals off of you, not the enemy. Transfusion and Kinetics heals off of the enemy, but it doesn't deal damage. Deverger, what's your experience been like playing Holy Light since you've gotten to work on it and actually play it?
Well, I made the set from scratch using some kind of obscure code that's only used in a few places that lets powers do different things depending on what you're targeting. So it'll check to see if it's a friendly or an enemy. If it's friendly, it heals them. Enemy damages them. Works in PvP too. And the AoEs, I'm not exactly sure the specifics of how they work. I just know if you fire into the crowd, it'll heal and damage anything in the area. But it's got a 10 target cap. The set was designed to combat a sort of problem with support sets in general, in that you'd have people, like defenders specifically, you'd have them play, they just want to do full healing, so they would just completely ignore their blast set, and at the end of the and near the end game, pure healing isn't all that useful, because most players are rocking some sort of defense in their characters. So you'd have a character that's not really contributing to the team very well. So with Holy Light, you have these attacks that also heal, so you pick them up and you can do damage at the end game.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I could almost see just making a character like it, because it has to be a defender, who only heals with Holy Light. Or if you wanted to do like Healbot and have a primary that's heavy in plus HP and then also having Holy Light. So anything you're doing is healing people, but then that gets into the overheal discussion from before of, well, you don't really need that in the end game. Everybody kind of stays alive or is pretty self-sufficient by that point.
Oh yeah, combinations like Sonic Holy Light and Force Field Holy Light would be great because they apply their buffs and they still have the healing from Holy Light to fall back on.
and I know at some point you had mentioned that you wanted to possibly exchange some of the powers with a melee component, something about like a holy blade of sorts.
Yeah, the Holy Light graphics, like the power effects, are sort of placeholder right now, and I was thinking of ways to improve them, and I might be looking into casting with a blade of sorts. And since you're going to be using a blade anyways, and I'm primarily a Dominator main, so if I'm close to something, I want to punch it. Just that's how it is. So I was thinking about adding in some optional melee attacks into the set, to where like you could pick a blast or a melee attack, but picking one or the other would lock out the other.
So power set choices within choosing the powers within choosing the powers. Oh man. That's so much customization that you can have there, that like you could have one but not the other. I think the blade is a good idea because that gives it more of like a crusader type vibe, but I do like that it looks like Peacebringer animations or something similar to their blast attacks, at least in the coloring, reminding me of Luminescence in a way.
Yeah, as it is right now, it's slightly fancied up Peacebringer power effects.
It just makes Force Field Holy Light that much more encouraging because you're giving them defense, which is, I would say, a little bit harder to get than resistance most of the time, right? People will be maxed out in resistance, but maybe not defense at the same time versus, Sonic Holy Light, but either one would be good. I think thematically, though, Force Field Holy Light sounds like it could be really fun because you could have like golden bubbles that you put on people, and you have this bright auras that you're smacking around, which is similar. I think Sister Psych had golden bubbles.
Yeah, oh my god, I fell so much in love with Psychokinetic Assault. I had taken a hiatus for a while, and when I first came back, I saw that, and I decided to take it with illusions because I said, you know what? We've got illusionary swords, we can have illusionary men. Just, oh my god, it feels so good. Like, and it's got its nice trade-off is like all these swords, yeah, they're doing damage, but then I would sit there and think, oh wait, they're not gonna take a hit for me. Oh, and then I would get bodied. But it's so good and so much fun.
There's illusion dominators.
Oh yeah, that's I think that's the only power set proliferation we've done so far. I ported Illusion Dominators and I adjusted some of the powers so it's more Dominator friendly, because one of the problems with it is that only like 2 or 3 powers were actually affected by Domination. So I worked around this by making it where if Domination is active and you cast the Spectral Terror, it spawns 2 of them. If you cast the Decoys, you get 5 instead of 3.
You just sold me. Boom, that's my new main. Illusion, Psychokinetics, or maybe like Illusion, Electric Assault. But definitely, I've been waiting for Illusion on Dominators forever, and to have extra pets, that sounds really cool. What did you do for the swords in the Psychokinetic set, the scimitars? Are they a reskin of another pet, or what is going on with them? Because that couldn't have been easy to do.
What actually gave me the idea was that there's a pretty rarely used type of Circle of Thorns demon that shows off the red side called a Blade Prince. And Blade Princes have an ability called Dancing Swords, where they activate an ability and it summons 2 to 4 little ice blades that come around and just beat you up. So I like the idea, and I applied it to Psychokinetic Assault.
Wow, that's so cool. It was just kind of a reskin of the swords that they already had available, and then you had the animations ready to go with that.
It's just so rare. Like, I guarantee that most people, you'd be like, have you ever seen a Circle of Thorns Blade Prince? They'd be like, what even is that?
Yeah, I certainly didn't know what a Blade Prince was until you just mentioned it.
I feel like I've seen dancing swords around, but I would never say Blade Prince if you asked me what they were called. I wouldn't have known. I bet there's a bunch of little things like that you guys are able to pick and choose parts from other, even enemies, it sounds like, and then give us their abilities to make new powers.
Right? It just seems so natural, like that it was like there the whole time, you know?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of obscure stuff in the game that you don't really see very often, and I usually I try to look there first to see stuff that players aren't used to seeing that's always been there and it's easy to implement.
Yeah, so you've got a pretty extensive knowledge then of all the little nooks and crannies of the game.
Yeah, I played from sunrise to sunset, so I know a lot about all the little intricacies of the systems and the little rare stuff that you see. The lore, too.
The lore. I've been reading back through the comic books lately.
Yeah, we love lore here. Oh my goodness.
But that I love to hear that there are even enemies that I don't remember. Like, I saw a picture of the snake guys on villain side. I forgot that when you started on villain side, there's like these snake guys with arms. And then I'm reading through the comics in my free time now.
Yeah, the snakes have a little cult in Mercy Island. You even return there in the higher levels to fight their goddess.
Oh, geez, I thought they were just throwaway. I didn't realize that actually was a big deal. That's kind of nuts.
Yeah, the City of Villains missions I've heard are like pretty messed up if you really get into them and start reading through the stories. And then I've been doing more gold side recently too, just to go through the story because I never really had the chance to get through everything. And it's pretty messed up. This is not a game for kids. And in the comic books, oh my god, the card that just came on the slideshow right now is Bottle Rocket, who's wearing like a thong and her booty's hanging out. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this content and lore that's just a little bit underhanded, I think.
And you mentioned some of the dark stuff too. And this happens to tie in with the snakes. I remember doing a mission a while back where we had to investigate, I think it was like a Cray laboratory. And the scientist had been studying some kind of serum that they were going to release out to the public as like a drink or something. And then you find that they turned into snakes and that they actually had made this serum that was going to turn people into snakes and was going to distribute it throughout the population. And you're just like, oh my god, it's another lost, Richter incident all over again almost. And then inadvertently you thwarted it. It's like, oh, geez.
Well, there's plenty of dark and not exactly G-rated friendly stuff in the game. Like, there's actually a full faction of like BDSM fetishists, including like dominatrixes and stuff.
And then we've also got alternate universe Miss Liberty.
Yeah, who may or may not have a thing for her grandfather.
Named Dominatrix.
Oh, the BDSM faction are actually her men.
They're her minions. Oh no. I can't believe like they put out this whole expansion to even like City of Villains. After that came out, they did, Going Rogue, and you go to Pretoria, and like the first mission that you do is for the back alley brawler equivalent, and you can like get chocolates or flowers for his girlfriend or something. You have to go pick up a few things, and then you can take the credit and say, oh, actually these are from me, or no, he gave these to you. And then I think I haven't gotten very far in it, but I guess that has like an effect on what they do and how they react to you later on.
Not that specific interaction, but Gold Side has a lot of callbacks to things you've done earlier in the story, and a lot more interconnectedness with its storyline and world. Like, even things that you do, there's certain things you can do like as you're leveling up at like level 10 that might get called back in the incarnate content when you're level 50.
The gold side choices that you make, I'm glad that that's not going to count, because I think I told him that I did it, or I screwed back alley brawler over is all I remember. I was like, nope, I'm going to be kind of a bad guy. But I like playing on the Resistance more because they have a cooler logo, I think. The kind of blue arrows pointing up. I like that better than the Loyalists. Plus, I don't like the whole Tyrant Dominatrix thing that they have going on. And the Resistance have those cool armbands and it's like a techno steampunk vibe going on.
Yeah, the way the gold side factions work alignments work are interesting because they're not really good or bad. It's just shades of gray. Like, you can do some really bad stuff as a well-meaning character, or do some really I don't know the opposite of that. No, I meant specifically the resistance and the loyalists. Like, their storylines are sort of good and evil, but you can mix and match. Like Power's storyline for loyalists is all about fame and like public attention. Like you do everything for, well, depending on what decisions you make, you can either do everything to actually help people with your status and your fame, or you can do it just because you're a glory hound.
Yeah, and I think on the resistance side, basically you can actually be fighting for the people, or you can be doing it because you want to overthrow the current government and replace it with y'all's government to extremes.
Yeah, resistance is basically like terrorist or freedom fighter.
Have you had a chance to possibly look in the code as far as how those different factions look? Because I can imagine, what if, say, you could skip the whole Pretoria thing and just as a loyalist or as a resistance, just go out into the world?
I think there's something hard coded to prevent specifically that. Like, I think if a GM were to teleport you from Pretoria as a loyalist to Atlas Park, it would immediately put you right back in Pretoria.
Yeah, that'd actually make a lot of sense. I accidentally moved a character that was an alt on another account that belonged to me, who was a villain, over to Atlas Park. And I was actually surprised because, yeah, the game auto-balanced it and yoinked them right back over to Mercy Island. I was worried for a moment because I was like, oh god, did I mess something up? But the system auto-balanced it, so it's actually really interesting that they've got those little tiny, tiny, minute checks and balances just to make sure that the world lore stays consistent.
They did have to add that code in, though, because there's a very famous story back on Live where a brute somehow managed to get blue side and remain as a villain blue side. He was able to team up with all the heroes and stuff, but I don't think he could pick up contacts or anything.
It's actually very funny that you mentioned that, because on the server that I played on Victory a while back, before Going Rogue had happened, there was a mastermind that when he made the character, for whatever reason, it placed him in Atlas Park and it treated him like a hero. And so we were running around. I think he had ninjas at the time. And so everyone was just aghast because they're like, oh my god, a ninja mastermind is a hero. This is wild. And I remember we were speculating, like, oh yeah, what if they make it where, this could be something regular that happens? And then lo and behold, months later, they announced Going Rogue, and we're just like, oh wow. And it kind of makes me wonder to this day if, like, maybe that was a developer being sneaky or something like that.
Maybe, or some just little code hiccup per location.
I
I assume it had something to do with the PvP zones.
I remember when villain classes could only play on the villain side and heroes could only play on the hero side, like you're saying, before Going Rogue. But I think that Going Rogue helped so much because the ideas and the balancing behind the archetypes, like there was the corruptors were, say, the defender equivalents or give and take, between them. And then you have masterminds that people were saying, well, masterminds are like another type of tank because they're extra bodies taking damage. It was just so weird. And then when Going Rogue finally did come out and everybody was allowed to switch back and forth, I just like that so much better. I would hate to have to be stuck now playing one side or the other. I love that we're able to jump anywhere that we want to go. And like right now, I have a scrapper just waiting for me to play by myself so I can go through and do the stories and badge hunt if I have free time or something like that. But there's so much to do other than just playing through and going to the AE and farming and getting to 50 and then shelving that character and then coming back and getting a 50 and then shelving that character and just running AE all day. What's the point? You're not a hero then, unless you're going through and actually talking to contacts or doing things together. And I think it's fun because we have such a small community here as well, that when I think about you guys, I think about the class that you play or the characters that you guys use. And I know we all have alts right now, but in terms of the server population and who I might make and what I might be. And I hope that anybody who's might be thinking about coming and joining Thunderspy or even Rebirth or Cake, because they have great communities as well, is going to feel maybe more motivated to come in and try some of the new power sets, or a power set that was already existed but is now reworked and balanced a little bit more. But there's so little time that we have to play so many of the different power sets, and it's just like, Normal Guy, I think you were saying last week, like you're a kid in a candy store, and we have Deverger here as like the chocolate maker who has actually not just reworked some of this stuff, but gone ahead and created some of his own, almost sounds like a passion project for Holy Light and Psychokinetics. When I saw videos of that months ago that people had posted, I didn't know that that was you who had implemented a lot of that. So that's really cool. And I hope that we're going to be seeing even more power sets coming out eventually.
Because you had mentioned about, how how it would feel terrible to be locked into being a hero or a villain strictly again. And I was just thinking how cathartic it is being able to work up to your way as vigilante or rogue and then be able to hop both sides because like you said the community is really close knit. And I think about how nice it is to be able to do that, but the fact that it's not so easy to do that being really rewarding. I had heard rumblings a little while back talking about how while they might not remove that, maybe just lifting it for all classes where heroes could hang out on the villain side or whatever, maybe for the sake of like conflict. Because
Yes.
while we have heroes, villains, vigilantes, and rogues working alongside each other, what if heroes could take the fight to Mercy Island and smack around a couple villains? I feel like that would definitely be the most next inclusive towards, multi factions.
No, open world. We have an open world PvP project in the works to where you can do exactly that. You will be able to take your heroes over to the villain zones and go beat them up if you want, and take your villains over to the hero zone. It's going to be opt-in, of course, so you won't be intrusive if you're not the PvP type. I'm not directly involved in that because it's mostly like higher end code stuff that's over my head, so I can't really comment too much more than that.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. Oh,
There needs to be like the big baddie of the server who just kind of goes around that we have to take down, because that's like an event in and of itself. If everybody's like had just run sewers and got to 15 and then somebody shows up on like a level 35 or 40 villain and is like, hey, we're gonna do this right now. Okay, well, I guess we better take him down. Or those one-on-one fights that you get, but there's also like the police drones and stuff everywhere, which I think you'd have to be really careful for. And then does that mean he can go to King's Row? Does that mean that they can go to Skyway City and get us while we're over there? That'd be so much fun though, because I don't want to be stuck in Atlas Park fighting somebody. We have that, right? We have Recluse's Victory. I want to go to like, not Perez Park because it's really low and hard to see everything, but there's got to be a good map somewhere for some more organized PvP stuff that we haven't really gotten to even PvP on before that already exists in the game.
Yeah, imagine Skyway City. You're trying to kill some clockworker troll on the top of the highway. And then this dude in just a full blue outfit and this dumb grin on his face, he just turns into a bowling ball. And suddenly you just get hiked off the side of the highway.
Actually, Paris Park PvP could actually be pretty exciting just because the tight corners, blind corners and stuff.
Oh yeah, the inside of the
You don't really know
forest.
you don't really know what to expect going around the dark little corridors of the forest.
Yeah, and the fact that there's no like open roof to the forest either. Once you're in there, you're trapped. And then just imagine you just hear this stalker's zoom kind of fade out. You're just like, oh god. It's like it turns into an Alien versus Predator and adds like a sense of urgency, which is like a completely fresh new take on an old zone.
That'd be fun. I think you can
I think ideally we'd want to have objectives.
yeah, we could have objectives, or I know that like the arena maps, because they have arena maps too that you can use, and they have those blue borders around the side. I wonder if it would be a case, and I don't know if you guys can really do this with the city maps with the way that it works, but like a cordoned off area or the whole map if you want to do like the whole thing, but then you're just jumping around and zooming around. I think a portion of Perez or a portion of any map that already exists that we wanted, we should be able to use for that. I bet there's some cool places in King's Row to jump around. It's all going to come together. So many pieces of little things, and just the stuff that people are working on, because even the power sets that you've gone and developed now, Deverger, are going to have a hand in the balance of PvP and the end game and everything that's going on, because it wouldn't be fair to have, say, like Psychokinetics just be the best over Dominator set and that everybody should use it. But it's supposed to have a place, and you were saying that you had made some adjustments to Holy Light and how it handled itself in PvP so that it would have some effects there as well. And it's so cool that we get to do this, and I really want to see what people come up with in terms of characters and concept ideas to do with these new power sets that are available. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And then really they are that hero for the server. I had a panic attack one of the first times that I logged in, because I went to hero side, and I guess everybody was on gold or villains at the time, and I did a search, and it was like me and maybe one other person in the game, And I thought, I am so alone right now. Every single villain in the entire game is gonna come get me. Like, I'm the only thing standing against Paragon City and the Richter right now, or whatever big disaster is gonna come next. But when we team up and we get everybody together and we have these really new heroes coming out because of the power sets, and that's what Statesman says in his caption. He says Paragon City needs new heroes. Well, we actually have new heroes available now for people to come in and really fill that role, especially if you like to do the role play stuff, because I know a lot of people who have been in the events are playing in character and adding to the story and stuff like that in little bits, and I really appreciate it, and it's really rekindled at least my love of the game and some of the fun stuff that we get to do. And I feel like a kid again. I haven't felt like this since the game was on live, that this actually is my hero who's moving through here, not just, oh, I'm gonna min-max this to the best of my ability because I know how builds work and I want the absolute destroyer here. That's not the point of it. I would rather fight somebody with a less optimal set who showed up in whatever zone, to do PvP, and make a little show out of it for people than just who can kill who over and over and over again, because that doesn't seem like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's of my opinion that PvP is only fun when you're doing it casually. Like, as soon as people start gaming the systems and making characters specifically to PvP is when the fun goes out of it for me. Yeah, to touch earlier what you said, one of my favorite things to see is just the unique concepts people that come up with and the characters they make based on using the new sets I've made.
Imagine if you were going into Dark Astoria and you group up with some friends, some on the villain side, and then you do some of those missions, and then you come out afterwards, and then they just drop group and flag red, and then just beat the snaz out of you. You're just like, dude, what the heck? That'd actually be absolutely hilarious. And I wish I knew more about the lore. The other day, since Chillblaine and a handful of us were talking about it or whatever, and I was learning a whole bunch about it. And I don't really know too much about Dark Astoria, but it seems like a really cool zone, honestly.
It's complicated because it involves time travel, ancient rituals, and stuff like that.
I was reading one of the comics, and they touched on people who live in Paragon City have the worst lives because at any moment a circle of thorns or a furbolg or something is going to show up and try to use you in one of their messed up ritualistic magic events that they do. And they were kind of joking like, oh, did you get kidnapped today? Oh, no, mine was last week. I got saved by this hero, because it must happen just all the time. And you would think that maybe we'd be on top of it with how many heroes are around. But I guess it's here on the less populated servers where you actually get the feel of that everybody is taken hostage. Like, you look around and there's people having bad things done to them everywhere. Can you just pass that by? Or you have to stop and street sweep a little bit every now and then. I lose hours to that at a time. Just like, no more skulls, no more trolls. Get out of here.
Some of the older story arcs in City of Heroes actually do cover solving problems. Like the enemy level ranges were set for specific points to where you won and you wouldn't see them anymore. The Vazalok story arc culminates where you go defeat Dr. Vaz himself in I think it's level 15 through 20 story arc. And after that, you just don't see Vazalok in any higher level zones just because they phased out. Or in the case of Red Side, they moved him and they started cozying up with the Freak Show. The Outcasts are sort of like that too, but they don't have any story to them. I'd like to add some story to see what happens with the Outcasts.
That'd be pretty nice, because I know in the rogue alignment mission, like when you're becoming a rogue as a villain, Frostfire actually shows up, and turns out he's trying to be there alongside the Longbow to help turn over a new leaf because he wants to become a cop. And then you end up just patting him into the dirt anyway because you're like, sorry, Frostfire, but I gotta do this. He's like, oh man.
You say, I really like your map, but I'm sorry, I have to drop you now.
Yeah, basically. And just be like, to think of the Outcast as being like the reluctant enemies, of the low level. Because you have like these gangs, and they're all vying for control or whatever. But then when you think about the Outcasts, all they are potential heroes who are developing these powers at random, and they don't really know what to do with them, and they just don't get the help that they need, really. And so they just end up turning to vandalism. And Frostfire, he happens to gain 2 powers. And so they're like, okay, well, we'll make you leader. and he's just kind of trying to keep things together. And so, yeah, I'd love to see a fleshed out perspective from the outcasts where, they're not maybe explicitly bad guys. They just happen to be put in that bad situation and are kind of with their backs to the wall, kind of saying, well, now since y'all treat us badly, we'll push you back. And then suddenly we're the bad guys because we're tired of, getting fed up with. So, oh man, I'd really love to see more fleshed out stuff. Because at later on, they end up making Frostfire more of like comedy relief, where you go and you break into one of his warehouses and steal something from him when he's trying to show off to the freak show. And so just being able to tie that into more of the story would be pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, I'd like to do a story arc where, like, as a general outline, like some of the outcast, like there's a outcast rehabilitation program or something in Paragon City where like you're trying to get them to be heroes and help them with their issues, but also at the same time, due to the fact that like their gang is phasing out, the like higher powered ones that don't want to go good are start like checking into the other higher end enemy groups. Like you'd start seeing mutant family members or mutant freak show, or even as far as like mutant, what are they called, warriors.
You almost feel bad for the outcasts because you're right, they develop their powers. They're just short of being heroes because Brick, if you fight a Brick, he has stone armor and stone melee, at least, the punch of it. And they could have been us. That could have been somebody who could be fighting with you in a mission, except their life had taken a wrong turn or something didn't work out for them. Wow, that might be one of my favorite villain groups now that I'm starting to think about it. The rehabilitation program, seeing them come back in later villain groups because they couldn't escape that type of life. Wow, who knew that the outcasts who were right in front of us this whole time are actually like victims. They're almost victims of circumstance.
And when you think about the Lost as well, they're basically exposed to the Richter virus and no one knows how to take care of them or doesn't want to. And so they just write them off as a gang rather than a group of victims. And so when they go and create their own little communes, they end up getting these anonymous donations, which being from the Richter, obviously, because it's the orchestrated intent. Then they go, oh man, wow, look at these guys who want to help us. You know what? These guys want to help us. They don't want to help us. You know what? Screw the system. And it's just, you see this recurring concept, with the Lost, the system screwing them over. And so what do? We just systematically push them out of the good parts of Paragon City. What do we do with the outcast? We end up pushing them out to the Hollows, where they have to contest with the trolls and the skulls and the Hellions. And then, let's see, the blighted and the infected, the water lines are just polluted and it's really messing with their heads or whatever. Then what do? Well, just push them back too. I mean, albeit an outbreak, they kind of destroyed a lot of everything, but instead of approaching it to try and help them, we're just kind of throwing them behind bars and putting a bandage over the issue. Same with the Sky Raiders. I had made a whole backstory for one of my characters, Dummy Thick, covering his origin story, but it's really tied in close with the Sky Raiders because when you think about it, imagine being this veteran and you fought in the Richter War, you guys barely survive, and then out of nowhere come these guys in capes. And everyone goes, wow, look what these awesome guys in capes did. And yeah, obviously they contributed, but I mean, all of your brothers in the military, who had fought blood and tears, and you're like, oh, okay, I see how it is. Guess we don't really exist. And so they go, okay, well, since society is doing better now, hey, can we get some help? Oh yeah, no, we can't spare it. Sorry. So naturally, of course, the Sky Raiders are going to be like, what the heck, man? You're screwing us over after all this hard work we put into trying to save the world. Whatever. We're going to go have our own treehouse off in the distance, and we're gonna, live by what we feel like are the old American values. And so all these shades of gray, just like talking about the Going Rogues expansion earlier, that become a lot more prominent, are rewinded back in time to when City Heroes and the City Villains first came out, where the shades of gray are there, but they're sunk so much deeper into the soil, where when you start reading into the lore, you're just like, oh my god, wow. maybe heroes aren't exactly the nicest guys sometimes, It's just, whew, it's quite a big thing to take in sometimes.
Oh, actually, the relationship between the Richter and Lost are really interesting because basically the Lost are the Richter's recruitment effort because they're cut off from their homeworld and they need more numbers to continue fighting their war. But also, this has been going on long enough that converted humans are high ranking in the actual Rikti army. Like one of the villain side level 45 contacts is a human or a Rikti general that's acting as an ambassador to Arachnos. And he used to be human, and he's aware of it, and he's pissed off about the fact that he's changed. And his goal is to have you get revenge on Positron, because Positron, I guess, was a major factor in the fact where he got rectified.
So there are some villain groups that we can feel sympathy for, or we know that it's not necessarily that they're bad people, but, you know, and the way that we deal with them is how we deal with them in game. But there is a really bad group, or there are really bad groups as well. So like the Skulls actually created a muddied down version of Superidine, like a gross street version. So anybody who's in the Skulls gang is a bad dude. They are like full-on drug dealers, and they're making that choice to be in that life that they're doing and wearing the skull mask and all that. So I don't feel bad at all, even with the female skulls that we see, you know, sometimes in the models popping up. Like, they made that choice to be there, whereas the Lost, it sounds like, did the Lost make the choice though, or was the choice made for them?
It's a mutative effect, so they don't really get to control what's happening. I think at some point they can get better clarity to know that it's happened to them, but for the most part, no, they don't get to control it.
Yeah, basically, it just kind of started happening to them, and they gravitated towards people who are similarly experiencing the same problems that they are. And they, you know, may be unwilling or whatever, but at some point they become disillusioned with the city, and probably even as they, you know, their mutation develops later on, of course, naturally they'll find some things out, they'll be told some things, and then they'll become a lot more willing to work alongside the Rikti. So it's less of like they're actively seeking it out and are more than welcome and open to it, and more so it's this manipulation being done by the Rikti to make them think that the Rikti have the best intentions for them. Versus, yeah, like what you said with the Hellions and the Skulls. The Hellions want to summon, you know, demons and everything, and the Skulls want people to die. So, yeah, it's actually really funny how the first bad guys are a lot more cut and dry, but then as you start leveling up, you start encountering more shades of gray, to the point where you run into people like Nemesis, and you're like, well, yeah, he's a bad guy, maybe?
Yeah.
Because everything's a Nemesis plot, and maybe the things that he's doing are for the good of everyone else, like, no one knows. Where there's not even any shades anymore, it's just this weird, opaque image.
I would take any of those villain groups over being the most horrible villain group, which is Arachnos, because the tarantula robot bodies that he puts those women in, you know what I'm talking about? They're actually in those spider robots, bent backwards and whatever. And I think you get to see those in perhaps Praetoria at some point. That is the worst villain. I would never want to be in Arachnos because of what they might do to you or put into you. I mean, give me Rikti powers and make me look gross. I'd rather that than be stuck in a metal thing.
Oh, anybody with psychic powers in the City of Heroes universe has just a crapshoot life. Like, you might get kidnapped. Like, Arachnos actively kidnaps psychics into their Fortunata programs. In Praetoria, every psychic is subject to, like, horrible psionic surgery that just completely messes up their entire brain and psyche. Circle of Thorns also have been known to target psychics for foresight reasons. It's just a whole bunch of stuff that are specifically targeting people with psionic potential. Magic's the same way. Like, anybody with move blood is screwed.
And I know as people start developing mutations for the Lost, their psychic affinity ends up developing to the point where the pariahs, you know, they can detect people who have mental, you know, aptitude, and will actually sometimes reach out and try and induct them into the Lost community.
So many people must have psychic abilities in order for that many villain groups to be able to fill their ranks with people who have those abilities. But that is not to say, because in the comics, they have some of the Fortunatas, and there's one who goes to, like, read Manticore's mind, or she can kind of tell if he's lying or not about something. And her psychic abilities are slightly different than that of somebody who has, like, foresight for the Circle of Thorns. But they live in this area. It's been affected by the Rikti. There's so many ways to get superpowers around there. I feel like just being in that, maybe that's what people are waiting for. they're saying, yeah, I'm being kidnapped by the Circle of Thorns today, but I might get some powers. Like, someone's gonna save me. Maybe I'll get bitten by a radioactive toad and I can turn into Toad Boy and jump around. But there has to be a reason that they're still around if they're in that much constant threat and danger. But the surrounding areas know better.
Well, the entire City of Heroes universe post-apocalyptic, basically. Like, Paragon City is one of the few places that hasn't been leveled in the aftermath of the Rikti War. So it is still one of these safe, like, even though it's got all this problem with crime and superpowered villains, it's still one of these safer places.
That's fair. It's like the island effect, that because the surrounding war walls are blocking off we don't even see, unless we go outside the war walls, how bad it really can get out there with everything that was going on with the Rikti and how the different gangs have taken over and all these people going unchecked with their super abilities. So yeah, no, that's a good point, that Paragon City, even though it has its problems, there's really nothing else around you that you could go to that wouldn't be just as worse or have less of an infrastructure. And at least here, you have the Freedom Phalanx, or you have, a bunch of heroes jumping around who are willing to come and help if they read the newspaper or listen to the radio band.
It would actually make for, like, a great expansion, like Paragon City Beyond the Walls, or just seeing the rest of the world and the state it's in.
Oh, Beyond the Walls would be awesome. Because one of the first patches in the game was Beyond the Looking Glass.
Oh.
So an expansion saying Beyond the Walls or something would be such a callback to the OG patches, and yet at the same time being just as monumental. I love sentiment like that.
It's gotta be hard though. When you go out there, it's gotta be like, if you're not in a group, you're getting taken over fast because there's a reason nobody's out there. It's horrible.
Heck, I can imagine where, like, there are no alignment systems. Everyone is perceived hostile, and you have to just assume that they won't attack you on sight, but you can still invite them, obviously. And it's just people who are hostile just kind of have this understanding, like, okay, we don't gank people in this area, and they create their own kind of, like, ethos, kind of like EVE Online almost, where there's some unspoken rules for certain things, and it's just kind of like the Wild West, basically. There's no police drones to save you from getting overwhelmed. There's no checks and balances for different levels or anything like that. It's just almost more open world, which it is because it's Beyond the Walls. And just, oh my god, fantasizing about stuff like that. I wonder just how hard it would be to come up with, like, an expansion or something like that.
Pretty hard, I would imagine.
There's still some cities and nations active, but we don't really know the full state of how capable they are compared to Paragon City because we never get to explore it. Like, I know the United Nations is still in effect and functional.
Oh, even if we just went to, like, another safe haven, like if we went to across, to another continent or something, where the buildings, the architecture is a little bit different, the stuff that, because what we didn't get to see when the City of Heroes had the cinematic that released with the guy and the girl, remember, the people who were doing martial arts and stuff, and she turned into water. We didn't get to go there. We didn't get to see any of that cool architecture and Asian influence that they had.
Those two actually are in the game, though. They just don't show up very often.
Yeah, they are. I want her power set where she turned into water and did stuff like that. I was like, how come we don't have that back when the game was still on live? Now we have water control and water blast and all that good stuff.
By the way, we have breaking news. Dr. Brain said the words, "You all hyped for Pirate." Currently waiting to see if he has any input. If he could shed some light. Oh, he just said to check the announcement. I guess we're going to be waiting a little bit longer.
Well, hopefully by the time that this podcast comes out, we'll have something a little bit more from Brain to know what is going on with the pirates. Deverger, thank you so much for coming on to the Paragon City podcast. I know that you have some more things that you're going to be working on, and hopefully we will get to talk about them on the channel and get a first-hand experience playing with a lot of those classes. So thank you for all of the work that you do, and keep it up because it really does add a lot of life and longevity to this game. I cannot believe that you are one of the people who actually is modding City of Heroes, and for you to come on and talk to us was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Deverger, and hopefully we'll get to see you again at some point.
All right, it's been great. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the new stuff we're making. and the stuff we haven't even talked about yet.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. And it looks like we'll probably end up seeing some more next time.